The amber liquid burned Maya Chen's throat as she set the empty glass down on Murphy's bar's scarred wooden surface, the sound barely audible over the din of conversation and clinking bottles. Around her, dozens of veterans in various uniforms clustered in small groups, their voices a mixture of reverence and grief as they shared stories about Commander Jake Morrison, whose funeral they'd all attended that morning. Maya's navy dress blues felt foreign after years of civilian clothes, the fabric stiff and unforgiving against skin that had grown accustomed to the soft cotton of her nurse scrubs. She'd almost skipped the service entirely. Jake had been her handler during those final months before everything went dark, before Project Siren became just another classified file buried in some Pentagon basement. But guilt had driven her here, guilt and the nagging feeling that she owed him this much, at least. He'd been the one to help her transition back to civilian life, to create the paper trail that made Maya Chen, former hospital corpsman, a believable fiction. Another round? The bartender, a grizzled man with marine tattoos covering both arms, gestured toward her empty glass. Maya shook her head, fishing a 20 from her wallet. "I'm good, thanks." She needed air, needed to escape the suffocating weight of memories that pressed down on her with each shared story about Jake's heroism. These people spoke of a man they knew, a decorated officer, a mentor, a friend. Maya remembered someone else entirely. The man who taught her 17 different ways to kill silently, who'd held her hair back when she vomited after her first assassination, who'd promised her that the nightmares would eventually fade. They hadn't. The October rain hit, her face like ice needles as she pushed through Murphy's heavy wooden door into the alley behind the bar. The narrow space reeked of garbage and stale beer, but it was mercifully empty. Maya leaned against the brick wall, letting the cold seep through her uniform jacket as she tried to steady her breathing. The panic attacks have been getting worse lately, triggered by crowds, by uniforms, by anything that reminded her of who she used to be. She rolled up her left sleeve, exposing the intricate tattoo that wrapped around her forearm like a living thing. In the dim light from the bar's back window, the seal trident seemed to pulse with its own dark energy. Most people saw the obvious elements, the eagle, anchor, and trident that marked Navy special operations. But Maya's tattoo held secrets within secrets. The serpent coiled around the trident shaft, its scales hiding coordinates from her first kill. The tiny anchor nestled in the eagle's wing, marking the date she'd learned to breathe underwater for 20 minutes. The almost invisible numbers worked into the design, each one representing a life she'd taken in service to her country. "Ma'am, we need to see some identification." Maya's head snapped up, her body automatically shifting into a defensive stance before her conscious mind caught up. 3 military police officers stood at the mouth of the alley, their white helmets gleaming under the streetlight. The lead MP, a stocky man with sergeant stripes, had his hand resting casually on his sidearm. Behind him, 2 younger officers flanked the alley's exit, blocking her escape route. "Is there a problem, Sergeant?" Maya kept her voice level, professional, even as her heart rate spiked. She'd been out of the game for 8 years, but some instincts never died. "We've had reports of stolen valor in the area," the sergeant said, his eyes already fixed on her uniform. "Someone's been claiming to be a Navy SEAL, showing off fake tattoos, buying drinks with war stories." His gaze traveled down to her exposed forearm, and his expression hardened. "Funny thing is, the description matches you pretty well." Maya slowly lowered her sleeve, her mind racing through possibilities. Someone had called this in, but who? And why now, after all these years of careful anonymity? "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Maya Chen, hospital corpsman, honorably discharged in 2018. She reached slowly for her wallet, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. "My ID is right here." "Hold it right there," the sergeant barked, his hand moving to his weapon. Keep your hands where I can see them. One of the younger MPs stepped forward, a baby-faced kid who couldn't have been more than 22. Sarge, look at that ink. That's definitely a SEAL trident. The sergeant's flashlight beam cut through the rain, illuminating Maya's tattoo in harsh detail. She watched his face cycle through disbelief, anger, and disgust as he took in the intricate design. You've got to be kidding me. A woman? Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but impersonating a Navy SEAL is a federal crime. I never claimed to be. Save it. The sergeant's voice cut through her protest like a blade. Women weren't allowed in SEAL teams until 2016, and even then, none have made it through training. So either you're a time traveler or you're a fraud. He gestured to his subordinates. Cuff her. Maya's training screamed at her to fight, to use the confined space of the alley to her advantage, to disable all 3 men before they could react. She could have the sergeant's weapon in her hands in under 3 seconds, could disappear into the maze of downtown streets before backup arrived. But that would only confirm their suspicions, would draw exactly the kind of attention that Project Siren had been designed to avoid. Instead, she raised her hands slowly, letting them see her compliance. You're making a mistake. The only mistake here is yours, sweetheart. The baby-faced MP produced a set of handcuffs, his hand shaking slightly with adrenaline. You picked the wrong heroes to disrespect. As the cold metal closed around her wrists, Maya caught sight of movement at the alley's entrance. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Phones appeared, their cameras recording every moment of her humiliation. She could already see the headlines. Fake female SEAL arrested for stolen valor. The story would go viral within hours. Her face plastered across social media as an example of everything wrong with people who claimed unearned military honors. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent, the sergeant began, but Maya wasn't listening. Her eyes had found a familiar face in the crowd, a man in a navy dress, uniform whose expression had gone from curiosity to recognition to something approaching terror. Lieutenant Commander David Park had been Jake's aide-de-camp during the final months of Project Siren. He knew exactly who Maya was. And more importantly, he knew what her arrest could mean for national security. Their eyes met across the alley, and Maya saw Park's hand move to his phone. Good. Maybe there was still time to contain this before it spiraled completely out of control. Call Admiral Hayes, Maya said quietly, her words barely audible over the rain and the crowd's murmur. Tell her the siren is compromised. The sergeant paused in his recitation of her rights, frowning. What did you say? Maya met his gaze steadily, rain streaming down her face. I said you're about to make the biggest mistake of your career. As they led her toward the waiting patrol car, Maya caught one last glimpse of Park speaking urgently into his phone. The crowd pressed closer, their cameras flashing like lightning in the darkness. Someone shouted a question about her service record. Another voice called her a disgrace to the uniform. Maya Chen, the woman who had never officially existed, was about to become the most famous fake SEAL in military history. And somewhere in a classified facility, alarms were already beginning to sound. The fluorescent lights in interview room C buzzed with the persistence of angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across the gray concrete walls that had witnessed countless confessions, denials, and broken spirits. Maya sat rigidly in the metal chair, her wrists still bearing red marks from the handcuffs that had been removed only 20 minutes earlier. The room reeked of industrial disinfectant and fear sweat, a combination that triggered memories she'd spent years trying to suppress. Across the scarred metal table, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Brooks arranged a thick manila folder with the methodical precision of a man who'd conducted hundreds of these interrogations. His dress uniform was immaculate, every ribbon and medal positioned with military exactness. but his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who viewed this as just another case to close. Behind him, a younger officer, Captain Jennifer Walsh, stood at attention near the door, her tablet ready to record every word. "Maya-chan," Brooks began, his voice carrying the authority of 23 years in military intelligence. Age 34, born in San Francisco to immigrant parents. Enlisted in the Navy at 18, served as a hospital corpsman for 12 years. He opened the folder with theatrical slowness, revealing a stack of documents that Maya recognized as her carefully constructed service record. Deployed to Afghanistan twice, Iraq once. Commendations for medical service under fire. Honorable discharge in 2018. Maya remained silent, her eyes fixed on a point just over Brooks' left shoulder. She'd been trained for this, how to compartmentalize information, how to maintain operational security, even under extreme duress. The problem was that her training had been designed to protect state secrets from foreign interrogators, not to defend against her own military. Clean record, Brooks continued, flipping through pages with deliberate slowness. Exemplary service. The kind of sailor any commander would be proud to have in their unit. He looked up, his gray eyes boring into hers. "So tell me, Petty Officer Chen, where exactly in this distinguished record does it mention SEAL training?" "It doesn't," Maya replied quietly, her first words since being brought to the base. Brooks leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "No, it doesn't. Because you were never a SEAL. You were a medic. A damn good one, according to these reports, but a medic nonetheless." He tapped the folder with his index finger. "So I'll ask you again, where did you get that tattoo?" Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The tattoo had been applied in a sterile room beneath the Pentagon by a man whose name she'd never learned, using ink mixed with trace amounts of rare earth elements that would show up under specific scanning frequencies. It was both a mark of honor and a tracking device, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "I got it in Kabul," she said finally. There was a parlor near the base. Bullshit. Brooks slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing off the concrete walls like a gunshot. "You think I'm some kind of amateur? I've been investigating stolen valid cases since before you enlisted. I know every trick, every lie, every pathetic excuse people like you come up with." Captain Walsh shifted uncomfortably near the door, her tablet forgotten as she watched the interrogation unfold. Something about the prisoner's demeanor bothered her, the way Maya held herself, the controlled breathing, the absolute stillness that spoke of someone accustomed to violence. This wasn't some weekend warrior playing dress-up. This was someone with real training. Brooks stood and began pacing behind his chair, his voice rising with each word. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The disrespect you've shown to every man who earned that trident through blood and sacrifice? The families of SEALs who died in service while you were playing pretend?" Maya's hands remained folded in her lap, but Walsh noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her breathing had shifted to a deeper, more controlled rhythm. She'd seen that posture before, in special operations personnel preparing for action. "I've seen your type before," Brooks continued, his pacing becoming more agitated. "Usually it's some wannabe trying to impress girls at a bar, or maybe score a military discount at Home Depot. But you took it to a whole new level. Showing up at a memorial service, wearing dress blues, carrying yourself like you actually belonged there." The door to the interview room opened with a sharp click, and a young ensign stepped inside, his face flushed with exertion as if he'd been running. He approached Brooks with obvious reluctance, whispering something urgent in the lieutenant colonel's ear. Maya watched Brooks' expression change from confident authority to confusion, then to something approaching concern. The ensign handed him a phone, and Brooks read whatever message was displayed on the screen twice before his face went pale. "Sir?" Captain Walsh stepped forward, sensing the shift in the room's dynamic. Brooks looked at Maya with new eyes, as if seeing her for the first time. Admiral Rebecca Hayes is flying in from Norfolk. She'd be here in 2 hours. He paused, studying Maya's face for any reaction. She specifically requested to see the prisoner. Maya felt her heart skip a beat, but kept her expression neutral. Admiral Hayes had been the architect of Project Siren, the woman who'd recruited 12 carefully selected female operatives and transformed them into something the world had never seen before. If Hayes was coming personally, it meant someone had connected the dots, had recognized the significance of Maya's tattoo, and understood what her arrest could mean for national security. Who is Admiral Hayes? Brooks asked, his earlier confidence evaporating. And why would a flag officer care about a stolen valor case? Maya remained silent, but Walsh noticed the almost imperceptible relaxation in her posture, as if some internal tension had been released. Brooks sat back down, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. You know her, don't you? This Admiral Hayes. That's why you're not scared. He leaned forward across the table. What aren't you telling me? The ensign cleared his throat nervously. Sir, there's more. The Admiral's office sent specific instructions. The prisoner is to be held in isolation. No further questioning until Admiral Hayes arrives. And, sir? He glanced at Maya, then back to Brooks. They're sending a security team to take custody of all materials related to this case. What the hell is going on here? Brooks demanded, but his voice had lost its earlier authority. This is a simple stolen valor case. Why is the Navy treating it like a matter of national security? Maya finally looked directly at him, her dark eyes holding depths that made him unconsciously lean back in his chair. Because some secrets are bigger than the people who keep them, Colonel. And some tattoos mean more than you could possibly understand. Walsh felt a chill run down her spine as she watched the exchange. She'd been in military intelligence long enough to recognize when a case had just become something far more complex and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Brooks stared at Maya for a long moment, then gathered up the files with shaking hands. Captain Walsh, you're with me. We need to contact base security and prepare for Admiral Hayes' arrival. He paused at the door, looking back at Maya one last time. Whatever game you're playing, it ends when the Admiral gets here. Maya smiled for the first time since her arrest, and the expression was both beautiful and terrifying. Colonel, the game ended the moment you put those handcuffs on me. Everything else is just cleanup. As the door closed behind them, Maya was left alone with the buzzing fluorescent lights and the weight of secrets that had shaped her life for over a decade. In 2 hours, Admiral Hayes would arrive, and Maya would finally learn whether Project Siren's ghosts could ever truly come home. The sound of rotor blades cutting through the October air announced Admiral Rebecca Hayes' arrival 47 minutes ahead of schedule. From the interview room's single-barred window, Maya could see the sleek Navy helicopter settling onto the base's landing pad like a predatory bird claiming its territory. Even from this distance, she recognized the distinctive silhouette of the woman who stepped out tall, commanding. Silver hair pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn 15 years ago when she'd first recruited Maya from a hospital tent in Kandahar. The base had transformed in the 2 hours since Brooks' hasty exit. Maya had watched through her window as black SUVs arrived, disgorging men and women in dark suits who moved with the purposeful efficiency of federal agents. The regular base security had been quietly replaced by personnel she didn't recognize, their weapons and bearings suggesting they were far more than ordinary military police. The door to the interview room opened with a sharp metallic click, and Admiral Hayes entered alone. At 62, she moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent decades commanding respect through presence rather than volume. Her dress blue uniform was immaculate, the ribbons on her chest telling the story of a career that had taken her from submarine warfare to intelligence operations to the highest levels of naval command. But it was her eyes that Maya remembered most clearly, steel gray and absolutely uncompromising. The eyes of someone who'd made decisions that kept the world safe while ensuring she'd never sleep peacefully again. "Clear the room," Hayes said quietly to the 2 guards who'd escorted her, "and activate the Faraday cage. Nothing electronic gets in or out until I say otherwise." Maya heard the subtle hum of electromagnetic shielding engaging, a sound that transported her instantly back to briefing rooms buried beneath the Pentagon where Project Siren had been born. The Admiral moved to the metal chair across from Maya with deliberate slowness, her gaze never leaving Maya's face. "Hello, Siren 7, Hayes said, using Maya's operational call sign for the first time in 8 years. "Admiral." Maya's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she rolled up her left sleeve without being asked. "I wasn't sure you'd remember." Hayes leaned forward, her eyes focusing on the intricate tattoo that wrapped around Maya's forearm. "Show me everything." Maya extended her arm across the table, watching as Hayes traced the design with one finger, her touch as light as a whisper. The Admiral's breathing changed as she took in the details. The serpent coiled around the trident shaft, its scales hiding coordinates that only 3 people in the world could decode. The tiny anchor nestled in the eagle's wing, marking the date of Maya's first underwater infiltration. The numbers worked into the design so subtly that they appeared to be decorative elements. "Kandahar, 2016, Hayes murmured, her finger stopping on a particular section of the serpent's scales. "The arms dealer's compound. You were supposed to be extracting intelligence, but the target made you." Maya's jaw tightened at the memory. Halil Nazir. He'd been tipped off, knew someone was coming for him. When I got to his private quarters, he was waiting with a knife. "The official report said he died of a heart attack," Hayes continued, her voice barely above a whisper. 43 years old, perfect health, no family history of cardiac problems. The autopsy found traces of a rare alkaloid that mimics natural cardiac arrest. "Extracted from the aconitum ferox plant," Maya said quietly. "You taught us to synthesize it in the lab beneath Quantico. Undetectable after 72 hours. Looks like natural causes." Hayes sat back in her chair, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "You remember the girl who couldn't have been there because officially she never existed." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Maya felt tears threatening for the first time since her arrest, the weight of 8 years of enforced silence finally beginning to lift. "Project Siren," she whispered. 12 women. SEAL-level training. Missions where male operators would be killed on sight. Hayes nodded slowly. The program that never existed, training operatives who were never recruited. For missions that never happened. She paused, studying Maya's face with the intensity of someone trying to reconcile memory with reality. "After 9/11s, we realized that our enemies were adapting faster than we were. They were using women and children as weapons, hiding in places where American soldiers couldn't go without causing international incidents. We needed operators who could walk into a Taliban stronghold wearing a burqa, who could seduce arms dealers and slip poison into their tea, who could disappear into crowds of refugees and emerge behind enemy lines." Maya's voice was hoarse with suppressed emotion. "You found us in field hospitals and forward operating bases. Medics and intelligence analysts and communication specialists. Women who'd already proven we could function under fire. I found 12 women who were already ghosts," Hayes corrected, "whose families thought they were dead, whose official records could be altered without anyone asking questions. Women who could disappear completely and never be missed." The Admiral stood and walked to the small window, her back to Maya as she continued speaking. "The training was brutal. 18 months at a facility that doesn't appear on any map. learning skills that would make a Navy SEAL look like a Boy Scout, advanced combat techniques, psychological manipulation, chemical weapons, deep cover infiltration. We broke you down and rebuilt you into something the world had never seen before. Maya closed her eyes, remembering the endless hours of training that had pushed her body and mind beyond every conceivable limit. The graduation ceremony. You gave us the tattoos personally, each one unique, Hayes said, turning back to face her. A work of art that was also a weapon. The ink contained rare earth elements that would show up under specific scanning frequencies, allowing us to track you anywhere in the world. But more than that, it was proof of what you become. A mark of honor that could never be taken away, even if everything else about your identity was erased. And then you sent us into hell, Maya said, her voice barely audible. Hayes returned to her chair, her expression softening for the first time since entering the room. 12 missions over 3 years. Each one impossible, each one successful. You saved thousands of lives, prevented terrorist attacks that would have changed the course of history. You were the most effective special operations unit in American military history. And then you burned us, Maya said, anger finally creeping into her voice. When the political winds shifted, when Congress started asking questions about Black Ops programs, you erased us like we never existed. I saved you, Hayes replied firmly. When the oversight committees started sniffing around, when senators began demanding accountability for off-the-books operations, I had a choice. I could let Project Siren become a political football, watch you all get dragged before congressional hearings and destroyed by politicians looking for headlines. Or I could bury the program so deep that no one would ever find it. Maya stared at her former commander, seeing the weight of command decisions etched in every line of her face. You gave us new identities, new lives, told us to disappear and never look back. I gave you the chance to be human again, Hayes said quietly. To have families, careers, normal lives. To forget the things you'd done in service to your country. But some of us couldn't forget, Maya whispered, touching her tattoo. Some of us still wake up screaming. Some of us never learned how to be normal. Hayes reached across the table and covered Maya's hand with her own. I know, and I'm sorry. But Maya, what you did, what all of you did, it mattered. The world is safer because 12 women were willing to become ghosts. Outside, Maya could hear the sound of vehicles arriving, voices calling out orders in the crisp military cadence she remembered so well. The cleanup had begun, the machinery of national security grinding into motion to contain a situation that should never have happened. What happens now? Maya asked. Admiral Hayes smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the woman who'd once promised a young medic that she could make a difference in the world. Now, Siren 7, you come home. Admiral Hayes reached into her briefcase and withdrew a device that looked like a sophisticated smartphone but hummed with electronic interference. She placed it on the metal table between them and pressed a series of buttons, activating what Maya recognized as a military-grade signal jammer. The fluorescent lights dimmed slightly as the device created an electromagnetic dead zone around them, ensuring that no recording equipment, no matter how sophisticated, could capture what was about to be discussed. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room, Hayes began, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Project Siren didn't end when we gave you new identities. It evolved. Maya felt her blood turn to ice. What do you mean? Hayes pulled out a tablet from her briefcase, its screen showing a world map dotted with red markers. Over the past 8 years, we've been tracking the other Sirens. Not to monitor you, but to protect you. Because Maya, you weren't the only ones who couldn't forget. The Admiral swiped across the screen, and Maya saw photographs that made her heart stop. Siren 3, Rebecca Martinez, found dead in her apartment in Phoenix, apparent suicide. Siren 9, Jennifer Park, killed in a car accident in Seattle. that investigators later determined had been staged. Siren 11 Sarah Thompson disappeared from her home in Denver. Her body never found. "Someone's been hunting us," Maya breathed. Her training automatically cataloging escape routes and potential weapons in the sterile room. "Not someone," Hayes corrected grimly. "Something. A network we thought we'd destroyed 15 years ago has been systematically eliminating anyone with knowledge of Project Siren's true scope." She swiped to another screen showing surveillance footage of a man in a dark coat following Rebecca Martinez through a grocery store parking lot. They call themselves the Covenant, former intelligence operatives from multiple countries who've gone rogue, selling classified information to the highest bidder. Maya studied the footage, her mind racing. The arms dealer in Kandahar, Alil Nazir. He wasn't just selling weapons, was he? He was the Covenant's primary financier in the Middle East, Hayes confirmed. When you eliminated him, you cut off their funding for 3 major terrorist operations. They've been looking for revenge ever since. The Admiral stood and walked to the small window, her silhouette framed against the gray October sky. "We thought we'd covered our tracks, that the Sirens' new identities were bulletproof. But the Covenant has resources we never anticipated. They've been using facial recognition software, analyzing social media posts, cross-referencing medical records. They found a way to identify you despite all our precautions." Maya's hands clenched into fists. "How many of us are left?" 7, Hayes said quietly. "Including you. The others are already being moved to secure locations as we speak." She turned back to Maya, her expression grave. "Your arrest tonight wasn't random. Someone called in that tip about stolen valor, knowing it would force you into the open." The pieces clicked into place in Maya's mind with terrifying clarity. They wanted me in custody. Easier to eliminate me in a military facility than on the street. Hayes nodded. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks received a call this afternoon from someone claiming to be a concerned veteran who'd seen you at Murphy's bar. The caller provided detailed information about your tattoo, your service record, even your current address. Brooks thought he was doing his patriotic duty. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "Where's Brooks now?" "Dead," Hayes said bluntly. "Car bomb in the base parking lot 20 minutes ago. Made to look like a terrorist attack, but we know better." She returned to her chair, her movements heavy with the weight of command decisions. "The Covenant doesn't leave loose ends." The signal jammer's hum seemed to grow louder in the silence that followed. Maya stared at the device, remembering similar equipment from briefing rooms, where she'd learned about targets who would never see another sunrise. Now she was the target, hunted by ghosts from operations she'd thought were buried forever. "So, what's the plan?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "New identity? Witness protection? Or do we just keep running until they pick us off one by one?" Hayes smiled, and Maya recognized the expression from their darkest missions, the look of someone who'd found a way to turn defense into offense. "We're done running. Siren 7. It's time to remind the world why Project Siren was the most feared special operations unit in history." The Admiral opened another file on her tablet, revealing detailed dossiers on 12 individuals scattered across 3 continents. The Covenant's leadership. Former CIA, MI6, Mossad, FSB, all of them burned by their respective agencies for crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. They think they're untouchable because they know where all the bodies are buried. Maya studied the faces on the screen, her tactical mind automatically assessing threats and vulnerabilities. "You want us to go active again?" "I want you to finish what you started in Kandahar," Hayes replied. "The Covenant has been operating in the shadows for 15 years. Selling state secrets, funding terrorist operations, destabilizing governments for profit. They've killed 3 of your sisters and countless innocent people. It's time to balance the scales." The Admiral reached into her briefcase one final time and withdrew a small black case that Maya recognized immediately. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was a syringe filled with clear liquid and a small vial of backup serum. Aconitum ferox extract, Hayes said quietly. Synthesized in the same lab where you learned to make it. Undetectable, untraceable, and absolutely lethal. She slid the case across the table. Your old tools, for old time's sake. Maya stared at the syringe, remembering the weight of it in her hand. The terrible responsibility of holding someone's life in a few milliliters of plant extract. And if I refuse? If I want to stay Maya-Chun, the nurse who just wants to forget? Hayes' expression softened with something that might have been maternal affection. Then you walk out of here with a new identity, a new life, and enough money to disappear forever. No judgment, no recriminations. You've already given more than anyone has a right to ask. Maya picked up the case, feeling its familiar weight. What about the other sirens? They're being given the same choice, Hayes replied. Some will choose to disappear. Others will choose to fight. Either way, the Covenant's hunting season ends tonight. The Admiral stood and deactivated the signal jammer, the sudden return of electronic noise making Maya's ears ring. There's a helicopter waiting on the roof. If you're coming with me, we leave in 5 minutes. If not, there's a car in the parking garage that will take you anywhere you want to go. Maya closed her eyes and saw the faces of her fallen sisters, Rebecca, Jennifer, Sarah, women who died because they'd been brave enough to serve their country in ways that could never be acknowledged. She thought about the families who would never know how their daughters had saved the world. About the terrorists who were still breathing because the Covenant had protected them. When she opened her eyes, Admiral Hayes was watching her with the patience of someone who'd made similar choices herself. Siren 7 reporting for duty, Maya said. Slipping the case into her jacket pocket, Hayes smiled. And for the first time in 8 years, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Welcome back to the war, Maya. Let's go remind the world that some ghosts refuse to stay buried. As they walked toward the door, Maya touched her tattoo one last time, feeling the raised skin where the needle had marked her as something more than human. The Covenant had made a fatal mistake. They'd awakened sleeping predators who'd spent 8 years learning to be human again. Now it was time to remember how to be monsters.